An hour after Gina's graduation dinner started, David still hadn't shown up. The dozens of calls I'd made to him had all been declined, and the only response to my text messages was a cold, automated reply. On my way. Gina stood up and sat back down 5 times, her head lowered, her fingers nervously pleating the hem of her dress. She was staring at her speech, utterly paralyzed by the line. I want to thank my parents. When I finally reached my breaking point and walked out of the private dining room, I saw David in the banquet hall right next door. He was standing shoulder to shoulder with Cynthia, his widowed first love. Smiling in front of them was Cody, Cynthia's son, a boy whose SAT scores were 300 points lower than my daughter's. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for raising me, the boy said, giving them a theatrical bow. David had his arm draped warm and familiar around Cynthia's waist, a proud, gentle smile crinkling the corners of his eyes as he nodded in approval. Amidst the roaring applause of the room, I stood in the doorway and watched them for what felt like an eternity. A profound, bone-deep exhaustion washed over me. I turned on my heel and walked back to my daughter's table. He's not coming, sweetheart, I said softly. Just go up there and say whatever you want. I reached out, gently smoothing away the tight, painfully polite smile on her face. And as for what we discussed before, Mom agrees. We'll do it your way. Gina's eyes widened instantly. Really? I gave her a reassuring nod and patted the back of her hand. Taking a deep breath, she stood up. Her speech wasn't long, maybe 5 minutes in total. Aside from thanking her high school teachers, the only family member she mentioned was me. I want to thank my mother, she said, her voice clear and resonant. Without her, I wouldn't be standing here today. I watched her speak with such poise and grace. My heart swelled with pride, but beneath it lay a bitter, aching sorrow. Beside me, the relatives on David's side of the family scowled. She didn't mention her father once? David's mother muttered, her face hardening. I always said girls shouldn't get too much education. It just makes them ungrateful. David's sister sneered, her eyes darting toward me. Mom, don't just blame the kid. She only says what her mother feeds her. My mom didn't teach me anything, Gina said. Before I could even open my mouth to fire back, my usually quiet, reserved daughter was standing right behind them. You're complaining about my dad, but where is he? My mother-in-law and sister-in-law froze, their lips curling into defensive sneers. Your father is a busy man. He obviously got held up by something important. What's the big deal? Exactly. He's just late, it's not like he's dead. But you? You're just an ungrateful little brat. No respect for family. Gina's eyes welled with tears, and she opened her mouth to argue, but I gently pulled her back. It's not worth it, sweetheart, I murmured, comforting her. After all, to the two of us, he might as well be dead anyway. The dinner wrapped up around 8:30. It wasn't until Gina and I had walked out the very last guest that we finally made our way out of the venue. At that exact moment, the doors to the adjacent banquet hall swung open. Before Gina could brace herself, she was looking right at David. He was walking out hand in hand with Cynthia, her arm looped intimately through his. Dad. Gina's voice cracked, her eyes instantly filling with tears. Why are you? Oh, Professor Foster, is this your daughter too? One of the high school teachers walking past paused, looking confused. How did she do on her exams? Was she celebrating next door as well? Behind them, Cynthia's son Cody stiffened, his smug expression faltering. Cynthia cast a hurt, vulnerable look at David and slowly slipped her hand out of his arm. I don't know her, David said suddenly. She's not my daughter. She must have mistaken me for someone else. A cold shock rippled through my veins. I stared at him, utterly incredulous. David, you. Mom, don't, Gina whispered, her hand clutching my arm. She was shaking violently, yet she was still trying to force a fragile, heartbreaking smile onto her face. My heart bled for her in that moment. The sheer cruelty of it. You're right, we did, I said, looking David dead in the eye, each word dripping with quiet venom. This is my daughter, and we have absolutely no idea who you are. We turned and walked away. For a fleeting second, a flicker of hesitation crossed David's eyes. But in the end, he didn't follow us. An hour later, the front door clicked open. David walked in, smelling heavily of alcohol. Cody had his graduation dinner tonight too. I was just standing in as his father to give them some support, he explained casually, kicking off his shoes. I only said that back there because I didn't want Cody to feel bad by being compared. It would affect his self-esteem. We can take your teachers out for another dinner later. He reached out to pat Gina's shoulder, but she flinches away, stepping back into the shadow of the hallway. There won't be a next time, I said, watching his face tighten. The teachers are leaving for vacation. Tonight was the only night everyone could make it. Next up is move-in day. A suffocating silence settled over the living room. David drew his hand back, his brow furrowing as he looked at our silent daughter. Fine, forget it then. Gina, you're an adult now. Don't be so petty over minor things. The real world won't coddle your little tantrums. He turned, walked into his bedroom, and shut the door behind him. Gina stood frozen in the middle of the room, fighting to hold back her tears. I didn't argue with him. Instead, early the next morning, I handed her a heavy folder. "Sweetheart, I need a favor," I said gently. "Take a look. Does this divorce agreement look okay to you?" Gina gasped, her entire body tensing as the words registered. My friend's mom is a really good lawyer. I can ask her to look it over." The pure, unadulterated relief on her face made my throat tighten with unshed tears. Gina had actually asked me to divorce him 3 years ago. It was right after Cynthia reappeared in his life and moved into the apartment directly downstairs from us. David was a university math professor. Whenever Gina asked him for help with a calculus problem, he would scowl and snap that he didn't have time to teach her. Yet, with a single pouty request from Cynthia, he tutored Cody in math every single day for 3 years without fail. For 3 years, he never showed up to a single parent-teacher conference for his own daughter. But for Cody's? He was always there, seated in the front row, perfectly on time. I had screamed, cried, and demanded to know if he even wanted this family anymore. But he would only adjust his glasses, looking at me with a cold, detached pity, as if I were hysterical. "Cody has a weak foundation, so my guidance actually helps him," he would say. "Gina's grades are mediocre. Tutoring her won't change much. I don't invest in low-return ventures. Stop being so emotional and fabricating rumors about Cynthia and me." He was always so logical, so rational that when Gina graduated valedictorian of her class, his only response to her text was 3 words. "Not bad, dear." And then he spent the entire night in his study, painstakingly mapping out a college application strategy for Cody, who had scraped by with a dismal SAT score. "Mom, why don't you just leave him? Come with me. I'll take care of you when I grow up, okay?" Gina had told me that a long time ago. Back then, wanting to protect her peace of mind so she could focus on her studies, I had swallowed my pride and smiled, telling her I was fine. But now there was no reason to pretend. He didn't want this home, so I was finally going to grant my daughter's wish. I was letting go. The sharp ring of the doorbell shattered my thoughts. It was Cynthia and her son. "I really didn't think things through yesterday. I'm so sorry for making things awkward," Cynthia said, biting her lower lip with practiced vulnerability. "David is just too kind. I only casually mentioned the dinner, and he insisted on playing the father role. But there's absolutely nothing going on between us, I swear." "Yeah, Mrs. Foster, sorry about stealing your daughter's dad for the night," Cody piped up, a smug grin plastered across his face. From the kitchen behind me, I heard the sharp clatter of a glass slipping from Gina's hand and shattering. "I know," I said, my voice dead calm. I extended my arm, blocking Cody as he tried to push past me into the foyer. "But then again, you would know all about having to steal a father." Cody's smirk vanished, his face darkening with rage. "What did you just say, you old bitch?" He raised his hand, his fingers curling into a fist. But my eyes locked onto the chain around his neck. My throat closed. "What is that? Where did you get that?" "Rachel, what do you think you're doing?" A voice boomed from the hallway. David stepped out of the elevator, instantly throwing himself between me and Cynthia's family. He shielded them like they were his own, the 3 of them forming a perfect, united front. "David, I just wanted to apologize to Rachel, but she started calling Cody names." Cynthia whimpered, her eyes pooling with tears. Before David could unleash his fury, I pointed a trembling finger at Cody's neck. "David, how dare you give Gina's guardian angel medallion to him?" David froze, the anger dying on his face as the words lodged in his throat. The gold guardian angel medallion had been crafted from my own grandmother's dowry jewelry. Gina had worn it every single day of her life for 15 years. "It's just a necklace," David said, recovering his cold demeanor. Cody was getting frequent colds back then, so I gave it to him for protection. "Rachel, why must you always obsess over such trivial things?" I slowly lowered my hand. "A cold? A trivial thing. When that medallion went missing, my daughter was in the ICU with severe pneumonia, fighting for her life. As she lay there with an oxygen mask strapped to her face, she was crying, blaming herself for losing her precious necklace. And all this time, it was a joke. Fine. I won't care anymore," I said, looking at David. A strange, liberating smile spread across my face. "Go and be their family, David. Gina and I don't need you anymore." For the first time, David's composure cracked. "Why do you always have to blow everything out of proportion?" he muttered, shooting a frustrated look at Gina behind me. "No wonder she's turning out just like you, completely incapable of rational thought." I smiled faintly. "We've been rational for long enough." I took my daughter's cold hand in mine. "If you won't leave this house, we will." David violently slammed the door shut behind him, his heavy footsteps echoing down the hallway as they left. "Mom, I'm sorry," Gina whispered, her knuckles white. "You guys are fighting because of me again." My heart broke for her, and I instantly squeezed her hand. "Gina, you have never, ever been the problem. Let's pack our bags today and move back to my old apartment, okay?" Through her tear-filled eyes, she nodded vigorously. David didn't notice we were gone until the following morning. He sent me a single text. Question mark. It was his usual concise, arrogant style, waiting for me to call him and beg for forgiveness. I didn't bother to reply. By the third day, losing his patience, he added Cynthia and Cody to our family group chat. From now on, Cynthia and Cody are part of the family, he announced. If you need anything, just talk in this group. Cynthia immediately shared a photo of the three of them dining at a Michelin-starred restaurant. Cody quickly followed with a smug caption. Thanks for the brand new gaming laptop, Uncle David. Runs smooth as butter. A $5,000 custom gaming rig, and David didn't even blink. Yet, when Gina had asked for a $500 laptop for her college classes, he had lectured her on vanity and greed. I didn't have the energy to watch their pathetic performance. I left the group, and Gina did the same. David's call came through almost instantly. Rachel, what is the meaning of this? It means we're getting out of the way so the three of you can play house, I said, my tone indifferent. Is there a problem? How much longer are you going to keep up this childish act? David sounded utterly exhausted, as if he were the victim here. You pack up and leave without a word, and now you're going out of your way to humiliate Cynthia and Cody. Have you ever stopped to consider the position you're putting me in? He spoke with such self-righteous indignation. I simply hung up. I was done wasting my breath on him. We cut off all contact. But a week later, Gina realized she had left a vital document behind, and we had to return to the house to retrieve it. The moment I unlocked the front door, we were greeted by the warm, cozy sight of David, Cynthia, and Cody sitting around the dining table laughing. It has a very modern, artistic feel. I love it, David was saying. He unbuckled the sleek leather watch from his wrist and carelessly tossed it into the trash can. In its place, he slipped on a crude, poorly made woven bracelet Cody had gifted him. That watch was the birthday present Gina had bought him last year, using an entire year's worth of academic scholarship money. Gina stood frozen in the entryway. A quiet, hollow laugh escaped her lips. Without a word, she opened her hand and let the designer tie she had bought for his upcoming birthday drop straight into the trash. David spun around at the sound. A brief wave of embarrassment washed over his face when his eyes met ours. Cynthia wanted to celebrate my birthday, and their apartment downstairs had a leak, so I told them to come up, he explained quickly. Neither I nor Gina gave him a response. We walked past them as if they were ghosts, searching the rooms for what we had left behind. It's been a week, and today is my birthday. Are you two still going to give me the cold shoulder? David grumbled, his brow furrowing. I looked up at him. Yesterday was Gina's birthday. Did you remember? Their birthdays were only a day apart. David's face drained of color. In the bedroom, Gina found her document, grabbed my hand, and silently led me toward the exit. David took a sharp breath and chased after us to the elevator, opening his mouth as if to explain. But behind him, Cynthia let out a soft, dramatic cry. Ow, my wrist. David frozen. He stopped in his tracks. He didn't take another step toward us, and we didn't look back. I thought we would quietly drift apart like this until we finally left the country. But I never anticipated what would happen next. Just days before our departure, Gina was hit by a car. By the time I rushed to the hospital, I was covered in a cold sweat, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Thank God she had reacted quickly enough to avoid the full impact. Aside from a fractured leg and a mild concussion, she was going to be fine. When she finally woke up and saw me, the tears instantly began streaming down her face. Mom, the money in my account is gone. $30,000. All of it gone? My brain went entirely numb. That money was the prestigious academic merit grant she had received from the school district. She had seen the notification of the transfer and panicked, rushing out to the bank to dispute it. In her state of distress, she hadn't seen the speeding sedan crossing the intersection. But there was only one other person in the world who knew the PIN to her savings account. I drove straight back to the house and slammed the debit card onto the table in front of David. I transferred the money, David said, entirely unbothered by my fury. I bought Cody a small studio apartment near his campus. He's an art student. Dorm life doesn't suit him. He needs his own creative space. My funds were temporarily tied up, so I just borrowed it for a bit. David. My nails dug so hard into my palms that they nearly drew blood. That was Gina's money. She doesn't need it right now anyway, David replied coldly. With a violent crack, my palm connected with his face. I couldn't hold back anymore. That was her money. How dare you steal from her? She was hit by a car because of what you did. She almost died. What? A flash of panic finally broke through David's stoic facade. A car accident? Is she? Rachel, I know you're upset, but how can you lie about something like that? Cynthia's soft, whimpering voice cut in. I literally just saw Gina downstairs a little while ago and said hello. She lowered her head, looking like she was on the verge of tears. We'll pay the money back. If it makes you feel better, I'll drop to my knees and beg your forgiveness right now. She made a show of sinking to her knees, expecting David to stop her. And he did. David's expression hardened instantly. Rachel, you're still the same pathological liar, he sneered, looking down at me. Even if I did take her $30,000, so what? I raised her for 18 years. Is $30,000 too much to ask in return? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was Gina. My call to her from earlier was still active. Mom, I heard everything. Her fragile, raspy voice came through the speaker. Let him keep it. Consider the $30,000 my final payment to him. We're even now. I didn't know a heart could feel so entirely hollowed out. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears, drowning out David's voice as he spoke. I'm taking Cynthia and Cody on a trip this week, David said, tossing the words over his shoulder as he guided Cynthia toward the door. Next week, when school starts, we'll all drive up to Boston together. I didn't say another word. The next morning, I walked into his study and laid the signed divorce papers and Gina's declaration of parental estrangement flat on his desk. Who said we were going to Boston with you? My daughter hadn't just been accepted to Ivy League schools in the U.S. She had also received a full scholarship to Oxford. Mom, do you think you'll ever regret this? Gina asked quietly a week later, sitting in her wheelchair at the airport gate. You've been married to Dad for so long. Do you think you'll regret it? I asked, looking down at her. You're so young, and you're moving across the world with your mother on your shoulders. We looked at each other, and then, at the exact same moment, we both laughed. Neither of us would ever regret this. That was all that mattered. Gina had only panicked about the stolen money because she was worried about our expenses abroad, but she didn't know that my career and personal savings were far greater than she could have ever imagined. We had all the leverage in the world to leave that toxic shadow behind. 10 hours later, our flight touched down in London, a vast, open sky welcoming us to our new life. The moment we turned our phones back on, both of our devices began vibrating violently. The international arrivals hall at Heathrow Airport smelled of damp rain, ozone, and fresh espresso. Gina sat in her wheelchair near a glass pillar, her fractured leg elevated on a padded footrest, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of hot tea. The morning light filtering through the massive glass ceiling was pale and silvery, nothing like the scorching, suffocating heat of the city we had just left behind. When we toggled off airplane mode, our phones didn't just chime. They vibrated. So violently they almost vibrated off our laps. Notifications flooded the screens in a deafening barrage of sound. 94 missed calls, 67 text messages, 22 voicemails, and dozens of urgent emails from our former home state. I casually tapped the first voicemail from David. His voice came through the speaker, not in his usual cool, measured, condescending tone, but raspy, frantic, and laced with an ugly, rising panic. Rachel, where the hell are you? Why are Gina's bags gone? Why are the closets empty? What is this envelope on my desk? The second voicemail, recorded 3 hours later. Rachel, pick up the goddamn phone. The bank just froze my primary account. They said there's an active criminal investigation regarding an unauthorized wire transfer from Gina's educational trust. Did you report me to the police? Are you out of your mind? And the third one, recorded right before our flight landed. Rachel, stop playing these infantile games. Cynthia and Cody and I are driving up to Boston right now for Cody's orientation. If you don't call me back in 10 minutes and unfreeze my accounts, I swear to God I will file a missing persons report. You are ruining Cody's big day. Gina listened to the voicemails, a faint, amused smile playing on her pale lips. She took a slow sip of her tea, her dark eyes clear and steady. He still thinks we're in Boston, she murmured softly. He really thinks the world revolves around him and Cody. Let him go to Boston, I said, pulling up my email inbox. Sitting at the top of my messages was an official confirmation from the University of Oxford's Faculty of Mathematics and Data Science. Dear Professor Vance, we are delighted to welcome you as our incoming senior visiting fellow for the European Mathematical Logistics Initiative. Your university provided housing in North Oxford is fully prepared, and Miss Gina Vance's residential college accommodations at Trinity have been finalized. My real maiden name Vance, not Foster. For 20 years, David had treated me like a domestic fixture, an uneducated housewife who relied on his university salary to survive. He had forgotten that. Before I gave up my full-time research career to raise Gina, I held 3 international patents in statistical algorithms, patents that had quietly generated royalties in an offshore trust he never had access to. Mom, Gina said, holding up her phone. Look at the family group chat. I glanced over her shoulder. David's sister had posted a frantic series of messages. David, what is happening? The police came to Mom's house asking for your whereabouts. They said there's an indictment for bank fraud and identity theft. David's mother had replied shortly after. It's that evil woman. Rachel is trying to destroy my son. David, where are you? Why aren't you answering? Block them all, sweetheart, I said, putting my phone back into my trench coat pocket. We have a train to catch to Oxfordshire. Gina tapped her screen 3 times. Blocked. Deleted. Cleared. As I pushed her wheelchair toward the express platform, the cool English wind swept past us, carrying away the lingering stench of a dead past, while Gina and I were settling into our sunlit stone cottage near the river. Charwell, 4,000 miles away. A grotesque comedy was unfolding at a prestigious university campus in Boston. David drove his leased Mercedes SUV into the university parking lot, his hands slick with sweat on the leather steering wheel. Beside him sat Cynthia, wearing a bright pink designer suit she had bought on David's credit card, and in the back sat Cody, slouched over his phone, wearing a pair of $300 wireless headphones. David, dear, my card was declined at the hotel front desk this morning. Cynthia whimpered, pouting as she looked at him with watery, innocent eyes. The clerk was so rude to us. You need to fix this before we go by Cody's dorm furniture. I told you it's a temporary administrative glitch, David snapped, his knuckles white. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. The rage and embarrassment inside him were burning like acid. Rachel filed a false report with the bank. Out of spite. Once I find her at Gina's orientation, I'll force her to withdraw the complaint. She's so petty, Cody muttered from the back seat, not looking up from his game. Ruining my big day just because she's jealous I got a studio apartment, and her precious daughter didn't. David pulled the car into a space, adjusted his designer tie, and smoothed his thinning hair. Don't worry, Cody. I'm here. Nobody is going to ruin your day. They walked toward the grand, ivy-covered admissions hall. David held his head high, adopting his familiar, arrogant persona as a distinguished university professor. He marched up to the registration desk, where 2 student volunteers were handing out orientation packets. I'm Professor David Foster, he said loudly, making sure the surrounding parents could hear him. I'm looking for my daughter, Gina Foster. She's the valedictorian from the Tri-State District. Which hall is her orientation group in? The volunteer typed the name into the terminal. She paused, frowning at the screen. Gina Foster. Let me check the master registry. She probably got a private lounge, Cynthia chimed in sweetly, resting her hand on David's arm. She always was a bit arrogant about her grades. The volunteer raised her head, looking at David with a strange, pitying expression. Sir, Miss Gina Foster formally declined her admission offer to this university 3 weeks ago. David froze. The color drained from his face in a sickening rush. What? That's impossible. She accepted her full merit scholarship. She did, the volunteer replied, turning the monitor slightly so he could see. And then she officially withdrew her acceptance, stating she was enrolling elsewhere. Her spot and her scholarship grant were released to the waitlist. Elsewhere. David's voice cracked, rising an octave. Where elsewhere? What school could she possibly go to that's better than this one? According to her exit file, the clerk said, reading from the notes, Miss Foster accepted a fully funded international presidential fellowship at the University of Oxford. The entire registration lobby went quiet. Several nearby parents turned to stare. Oxford? Cynthia gasped, her sweet facade cracking into sheer disbelief. She went to England? No. That's a lie. David roared, slamming his hand onto the registration counter, scaring the young volunteer. She doesn't have the money for Oxford. I control her accounts. She's playing a trick on me. Where is my wife, Rachel Foster? Sir, please calm down. An administrative director stepped out from an inner office, flanked by 2 campus security guards. Are you Professor David Foster? From State University? Yes, I am. David demanded. I demand to know where my family is. Mr. Foster, the director said coldly, pulling an official legal envelope from his jacket. We don't know where your family is, but 2 detectives from the State Financial Crimes Unit and an officer from the local precinct have been waiting for you in the security office for 45 minutes. Cynthia let out a sharp shriek. Cody instinctively took 2 steps back, trying to detach himself from David. Detectives? David stammered, his body shivering uncontrollably. What? Detectives? Regarding the grand larceny of $30,000 from an academic trust fund and a civil summons served by Vance and Partners law firm, the director said, gesturing to the guards. Please follow them, sir. You are disturbing our orientation. The state police precinct smelled of stale coffee, industrial floor cleaner, and cheap paper. David sat in a cold interrogation room for 6 hours. Because his personal and joint bank accounts had been frozen under a court-issued asset preservation order filed by my legal team, he couldn't even post the $5,000 bail required for his pre-arraignment release. When his sister finally arrived to post bail using her own savings, she looked at David with pure, venomous hatred. "You absolute idiot," his sister shrieked the moment they stepped out onto the courthouse steps. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" "It's a misunderstanding," David yelled back, his hair wildly disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained. "Rachel set me up. She hid money from me. She took Gina to England without my permission." "She didn't set you up, David. The police showed us the records," his sister screamed, slapping a stack of printed papers against his chest. "You transferred $30,000 from your daughter's account to buy a studio apartment for Cynthia's son, a boy who isn't even your blood. The school board has already suspended your teaching credentials pending a formal ethics hearing." What did you say?" David stumbled backward, clutching the cold stone railing. "Suspended? The university president called Mom an hour ago," she sobbed, tears ruining her makeup. "The local newspaper published a story about a university professor stealing his valedictorian daughter's scholarship money to buy a condo for his mistress's child. The entire department knows. You are an absolute disgrace." David turned his wild, bloodshot eyes toward Cynthia, who was standing 20 feet away near her leased car, holding her handbag tightly. "Cynthia," David rasped, taking a step toward her, reaching out a trembling hand. "Cynthia, talk to them. Tell them I bought that studio for Cody's art career. Tell them we're a family." Cynthia looked at David, at his ruined suit, his bloodshot eyes, his revoked tenure, and his frozen bank accounts. The fragile, sweet, vulnerable look on her face melted away in a single second. Her lips curled into a cold, disgusted sneer. "A family?" Cynthia sneered, her voice completely devoid of its usual soft cadence. "David, you don't even have a job anymore. You can't even pay the rent on our downstairs apartment." "Cynthia, how can you say that?" David choked out, tears of shock welling in his eyes. "I gave up my daughter for you. I threw away 20 years of marriage for you and Cody. I gave you her grandmother's golden angel medallion. And what good is a cheap gold trinket if we're being evicted?" Cynthia spat, tossing her head back. "You told me you were a millionaire, David. You told me you owned that penthouse. You told me Rachel was just a penniless parasite, living off your salary. Turns out you're the parasite." She turned to Cody. "Cody, get your bags out of his car. We're taking an Uber to your uncle's house in New Jersey." "Cynthia, wait, please." David stumbled down the steps, falling onto his knees on the wet pavement, grabbing the hem of her skirt like a pathetic beggar. "I love you. I've loved you for 30 years. Don't leave me." Cynthia didn't even look down. She pulled her skirt out of his grip with a sharp yank, stepped into the waiting Uber, and slammed the door in his face. The car drove off, leaving David kneeling alone in the rain, his clothes soaked in filthy gutter water, his loud, pathetic sobs echoing down the empty street. Spring in Oxford arrived with a quiet, breathtaking brilliance. Our stone cottage on Norham Gardens was surrounded by ancient oak trees, blooming wisteria, and lush green lawns that stretched down to the banks of the River Charwell. Gina's leg cast had come off 3 weeks ago. She was walking smoothly now, her posture straight, her face radiant with a healthy, vibrant glow that I hadn't seen on her in 5 years. Every morning, she walked to Trinity College, where she was studying advanced, pure mathematics under some of the world's most distinguished scholars. Her professors didn't call her mediocre. They called her a prodigy. As for me, I was sitting in my sunlit conservatory office, reviewing a multi-million-pound research grant proposal from a major European pharmaceutical consortium. My phone rang. It was my lead international attorney, Ms. Helen Vance. "Rachel," Ms. Vance's crisp British voice came through the line. "The final decree of divorce has been granted by the High Court under the International Jurisdiction Protocols. The court has recognized your full, sole ownership of all premarital intellectual property and offshore accounts." "And David's financial liability?" I asked, turning a page of my dossier. "The court ordered him to repay the full $30,000 to Gina's trust, along with $50,000 in statutory damages for domestic financial abuse," Ms. Vance reported coldly. "To satisfy the judgment, the court executed a forced liquidation of his remaining pension funds and his half of the suburban apartment." "Does he have anything left?" "He has approximately $1,200 in a basic savings account, MS. Vance chuckled softly. "He was formally terminated from his university position last month for gross ethical violations. He's currently living in a rented basement room near the train station, working as a night shift substitute instructor for an online test prep site." I looked out the window at the swans floating peacefully on the river. "Thank you, Helen," I said smoothly. "That will be all." "Oh, one more thing, Rachel," Helen added. "The International Congress of Mathematicians is holding its annual summit in London next month. Miss Gina Vance has been selected to deliver the opening keynote address on algorithmic probability. It's an unprecedented honor for an undergraduate. My chest swelled with a deep, radiant pride. She worked hard for it. The summit invitation list is public, Helen noted, a sharp glint in her voice. I suspect certain academic circles back in your home state have already seen it. Let them see it. I smiled softly. It's time they learn what a real success looks like. The Guildhall in London was illuminated by hundreds of golden chandeliers, casting a warm, majestic light over 2,000 elite academics, university deans, global researchers, and media outlets from 30 countries. Tonight was the opening gala of the Global Mathematics and Science Innovation Summit. Gina stood near the main stage, wearing a stunning midnight blue silk gown, her dark hair styled in elegant waves, holding a glass of sparkling water. Surrounding her were several senior department heads from Oxford, Cambridge, and Princeton, all hanging on her every word as she calmly explained her latest paper on fluid dynamics. I stood a few paces back, wearing an emerald green velvet dress, chatting pleasantly with the Dean of Science at Imperial College. Near the back of the Grand Hall, huddled near the public gallery doors, stood a man who looked like he didn't belong in the building at all. David Foster was wearing an ill-fitting, faded gray suit he had bought from a thrift store 10 years ago. His hair was streaked with stark white, his face gaunt, his hands rough and calloused from long hours of manual paper grading. He had spent his last $300 to buy a day pass ticket to the summit's public floor, desperate to find a publisher or a regional dean who might give him a low-level teaching job. He was standing near the catering table, filling his coat pocket with free rolls, when his eyes happened to drift toward the main stage. He froze. The glass of cheap house wine in his hand slipped, shattering against the marble floor. Standing under the central spotlight, flanked by Nobel laureates, was the girl he had called mediocre. The daughter whose graduation dinner he had abandoned for a widow's son. The daughter he had publicly disowned in front of a high school teacher. She looked breathtaking. She looked regal. She looked like an absolute queen. And standing right beside her, holding court with the world's most powerful academic sponsors, was Rachel, the woman he had called a pathological liar and a worthless housewife. Rachel was radiant. Her skin was glowing, her emerald gown catching the light. An aura of supreme, unshakable confidence surrounding her every movement. David's mind went completely blank. A suffocating, terrifying tightness seized his chest, driving the air completely out of his lungs. Gina, he whispered, his voice trembling so violently it barely carried. Rachel. Driven by a sudden desperate, insane impulse, David broke away from the gallery line and began pushing through the crowd of distinguished guests, stumbling toward the stage. Gina. Rachel, he shouted, his voice cracking, tears instantly blinding his vision. Gina. It's Dad. It's your father. The surrounding professors frowned, stepping back in disgust as the disheveled, unkempt man pushed past them. Two tall, burly security officers in black tuxedos immediately stepped into David's path, blocking him with iron authority. Sir, please stand back. This is a private VIP reception. Get out of my way, David screamed, his face contorted in a pathetic mixture of grief, pride, and total madness. That's my daughter. That's my wife. I'm Professor David Foster. I raised her. She's my blood. The commotion drew the attention of the crowd near the stage. Gina paused mid-sentence. She turned her head slowly, her dark eyes landing on the frantic, broken man being restrained by security 20 feet away. Rachel stepped up beside her daughter, resting a gentle, protective hand on Gina's shoulder. David caught Rachel's eye. Hope flared brightly in his bloodshot eyes. A desperate, pathetic hope that she would recognize him, that she would call off the guards, that she would invite him back into her golden world. Rachel. David wept, dropping to his knees right there on the polished marble floor, bowing his head in front of 2,000 international delegates. Rachel, I was wrong. I was blind. Cynthia tricked me. She took everything. Please, Rachel, let me come home. I'm your husband. Gina, I'm your dad. The entire Grand Hall went dead silent. Cameras from international news outlets turned toward the scene, flashes blinking in the dim light. Gina looked down at the man kneeling in the dirt at her feet. There was no anger in her face. No bitterness. No lingering trauma. She looked at him with the cold, clear, polite curiosity one reserves for a stranger who had stumbled into the wrong room. Officer, Gina's clear, melodious voice rang through the quiet hall carrying over the public address system. Could you please remove this man? He's disrupting the symposium. David froze as if he had been struck by lightning. Gina. No. I'm your father. My father died 3 years ago, Gina said softly, looking straight into his bloodshot eyes with absolute clarity. He was a math teacher who didn't invest in low-return ventures. You're just a stranger who owes me $30,000. The crowd erupted into hushed, judgmental murmurs. The two security officers grabbed David by his arms, lifting his limp, weeping body off the floor, dragging his feet across the marble tiles as he kicked and screamed like a dying animal. Rachel, Gina, don't leave me, please. I'm your family. I'm your family. His frantic screams echoed down the long stone corridor until the heavy oak doors were slammed shut, sealing him out into the freezing London night forever. The keynote address began 20 minutes later. Gina stood behind the podium, her voice steady, logical, and brilliant, weaving complex mathematical proofs into a vision of future technology that captivated the entire global audience. I sat in the front row, holding a glass of champagne, watching my daughter shine like a star in a sky that had no boundaries. Beside me, the Dean of Oxford smiled warmly. She's extraordinary, Professor Vance. You must be deeply proud. I am, I smiled, taking a slow sip of wine. She built her own path. After the gala concluded, Gina and I walked out onto the high stone balcony of the Guildhall overlooking the glowing lights of the London skyline. The rain had stopped. The night sky above the Thames was clear, vast, and filled with a million glittering stars. Gina leaned against the stone railing, the cool night breeze playing with the silk of her gown. She looked down at the street below, where a single tiny figure in a wrinkled suit was slowly trudging away into the dark, vanishing into the shadows of the city. She pulled the gold guardian angel medallion from her clutch bag, the medallion my lawyer had legally recovered from Cody's belongings during the police seizure. She looked at it for a moment, then reached out her hand over the balcony edge. Mom, she looked at me, a gentle question in her eyes. It's your choice, sweetheart, I said softly. Gina opened her fingers. The gold medallion fell, spinning through the night air, reflecting the city lights one last time before disappearing into the deep, dark waters of the river. Below, Gina smiled, turned her back on the balcony, and took my arm. Let's go home, Mom, she said, her voice filled with a bright, beautiful warmth. We have an 8 o'clock lecture tomorrow. Yes, I said, walking side by side with my daughter into the warm, brightly lit hall ahead. We have a full life ahead of us.